situation and getting over it and being very supportive with me, dealing with the baggage that comes with that, yada, yada, yada. So this is him. For those of you who have heard about him, that's him. When Dr. J told me that we were talking about family, we've been racking our brains to try to figure out which way to approach this, because family is very important to us. But I think the one thing that is really important is that my husband was raised totally different than I was raised. He's the oldest child, I'm the youngest. He has 2 siblings, I have 6. He was raised in the church. Church came later for me, and it didn't last long. But so there are a lot of differences, but what we have decided to do is to bring the best parts of our family together and raise our children in a way that makes sense for us, so that we can try to alleviate some of the things that we did that our parents didn't catch, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I don't know how successful we're going to be, but that's our aim. And it's been really interesting so far to merge those 2 backgrounds. When you have 2 people with 2 different backgrounds, it's challenging. And we have a blended family. That's our only child together over there. Her name is Braylon Jamila. Say, hey, Braylon. Not? Okay. So that's just a preface, and I'll let him get in a little bit deeper, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what family is to us.
Good evening, y'all.
Good evening.
We're really informal when we come and speak. We like to kind of be interactive. So, you know, when my bride told me that we were going to be talking about family tonight, we kind of bounced around some ideas. We do have a blended family, and I think that's kind of the focus on what we're going to try to bring to you guys tonight, and the fact that we had to bring 2 different styles of rearing and 2 different households and 2 different sets of kids together under one roof. I have 2 kids. She has a son as well, and we had to bring those kids together under a roof. I have the way that I was raised and my lifestyle. She has the way that she was raised and her lifestyle, and those 2 things that we had to bring together. So when you talk about family, one of the most important things about family is compromise. And in compromise, you have to learn that you have different personalities, you have different thoughts, you have different feelings, and you have to learn how to bring those things together and bring them and mesh them into one thing that's a working and viable model for you to move forward in. Now, what people don't always say is that those things don't come about very easily. This didn't happen automatically. It didn't happen after a couple of years of dating. It happened after a long while. And outside of the compromise, there was also the element of communication that was also very key. So those are 2 things that are very important when you're talking about families: communication and compromise. If we didn't sit down and we didn't talk about some of the issues that we were having, some of the ways that we grew up, some of the differences in child rearing, the differences in relationships that we brought together, we might not have made it to the point that we made it. Our relationship is not one that's, you know, extremely traditional. I guess you could say that. We dated for 7 years, 8 years. We lived together for 3 of those years. Then we broke up for 3 years in between. Then we got back together.
Best thing we ever did.
Yes, and that's the best thing that we ever did. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But family, communication, compromise, and also not being conventional. Those are the 3 things: communication, compromise, and not being conventional. Because society has a way in a box where they put family and the way the family is supposed to operate, and then you have what's real in reality, and what it's really like when you're under a roof and you're dealing with kids and family and a marriage, and you're dealing with jobs, and you're dealing with all those kind of things that you're dealing with. You have what actually happens under a roof, and then you have what people say on the outside, or what people say in the church, or what people say at your job, or wherever it might be, of what they expect of you. But understand that those people don't have to live under your roof, they don't have to live under your house, they don't have to raise those kids that you raise. So in doing that, understand communication, compromise, and not being conventional. It's the most important thing. Family is very important to us. Just with us being here on Tougaloo's campus and understanding, all of us as Black folk, understanding that in our village, the most important thing and the most powerful thing that has been for our village has been family. And we've had people, and we've had very bad things in the past that have happened that have tried to break up the nuclear family that exists amongst black folk, and that goes back to slavery, taking the male out of the home, separating the mother and the father, separating the kids from the parents. That's something that's traditionally been bred in us and that we are now trying to deal with in modern times, trying to fix. So it's a very important thing, and I think forums like this are important to talk about that because everyone is different. And the one thing that we want you to take away from this today is that regardless of what this couple says or what we say or what our next speaker says or anybody that you've heard, ultimately you have to do what works for you inside of your home. And it's going to be completely different. What works for us, I'm pretty sure, is different than what works for this couple. And what works for this couple is going to be different than what works for everybody else. It's finding a healthy medium within your home to be able to successfully run that village that you live in. So
we had to also sit each one of our kids down and have a conversation with them. They were pretty young, but we recognized early on that this was going to be a little bit more than dating. In fact, the first time that he ever said anything to me, he said, "Will you marry me?" And it didn't feel like a line. And I was like, oh, this dude wants to marry me. Like, it wasn't even like game or anything. So it kind of stuck. But it was always something that we thought would last forever. So we took the proper precautions. I don't think I met his mother for a year. His mother, Mary Franklin, was very, very dominant in her household. In my household, my father was dominant. So I was taught to be submissive and to be my husband first, and he gotta do this, and I gotta do what he tell me to do, and all that kind of stuff. And it didn't work for me, it didn't feel good. But I brought that into our relationship. And he was like, that ain't what I want. Like, I want you to want something, be something, follow your dreams, Whatever it is you want to do, I'm here to support you. And then eventually I got to the point to where he reminds me of this often because it was kind of, I guess it tickled him a little bit. But eventually, after a couple of years, I got to him after we were married and said, I don't want to be Kamikaze's wife only. Like, I want people to be like, this is Queen. Oh, and she's married to Kamikaze. Not, this is Kamikaze's wife. That became something that I had to work through. And he helped me to work through that because I have my own identity. But I was taught that you kind of become your husband's wife when you get married instead of being husband and wife. And I don't think my parents did that on purpose. I think it's just what I saw. So with him having a different dynamic in his household, he presented something different to me. So imagine what this young lady over here is going to have in her household. It's going to be totally different from his or mine because we're raising her to be who she is. Even if she's alone, she's still gonna be who she is and happy with that because that's what comes first. But another thing is, stop it. Another thing is when we sat our kids down, when I sat my son down, he acted like he got it, like he was cool with it. But they had some rounds, like it didn't go over well. And with his son, it took a little while, but some years later, we started seeing where he was affected. So you have to watch the kids. And like he said, family just always has to be first. It always has to be the driving force for whatever you're doing. In our opinion, that's what works for us. And by family, I mean us and our children. That's what I mean by family. Now I have sisters and brothers. I need them all. My mother and father have both transitioned. But what works for me and what drives me is my household.
We also run a business together, so that's also a dynamic that a lot of people don't experience because there's two different types of personalities and two different types of business ideals that we have to discuss, and we have to be able to separate husband and wife from business partners when we do that as well. So all the things you heard about working with somebody that you love or working with your husband or your wife, all those things are true. We have the silliest arguments.
Say they false.
Probably on my end they're true. She's probably cool on her end, but the same things exist in that dynamic. Just having communication and having compromise, because what we do inside of the Kundi compound also affects what happens in the household as well, because it's just an extension of the household. Kundi means family or team in Swahili, and that's why we named it the Kundi compound, because that's what it means, and that value to us is very important. So I can't stress enough, we talk, This is my best friend. I'm her best friend. That's the way that it has to be if this is going to work. We talk about any and everything, and we communicate, first of all, even if what we say is not going to be the most amenable thing to the other person. We're truthful in that, and that's what keeps everything above board and keeps everything even keeled when you're running a household. Because if you keep anything away, if you don't actually speak your mind, if you don't say what you need to say, if you are not critical where you need to be critical and supportive where you need to be supportive, then those things are going to always lead to problems.
It leads to resentment. And relationships can't thrive in resentment.
Yeah.
So that's basically the background of who we are and what family means to us. And we're not saying that it's easy, because it definitely is not. When I first met his baby mamas, I expected to have an attitude with them, because that's what people do. You don't like the baby mama just for whatever reason. You're just not supposed to like them. And I went to Christmas at his house, and they were both there, chilling, like with gifts and everything, like a family. And I was like, what is this? I'm probably supposed to be mad at this. Like, why are they there? Why are they here? And I didn't even know how to act, because it was so regular and routine to everybody in the house that I just decided, okay, I'm just gonna take it for what it is and not really deal with this right now and not do what my ratchetness is telling me to do. So, so what I did was talk to him later, and he was like, why do you think that there needs to be a problem? Who says that? Right. My children, both of my baby's mothers have always gotten along. And you're gonna get along with them too, because we have communication, we make compromises, and it's not conventional. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is our children. I love their children, they love they spend the night with each other, the kids are together all the time. We'd really like for them to babysit a little bit more, but we understand that ain't gonna come. But it's just all about those three things. Communication. What was it? Communication. Compromise.
So, I mean, to us, I mean, when we had the conversation, this is the last piece, if y'all have any questions, you know, I never understood that in the black community, and I guess to a larger extent into, you know, the community at large, there's this stigma or this stereotype, or there's this belief that there is supposed to be instant drama and instant tension when you are in other relationships and you have to deal with the mothers and fathers of your children. And I never understood that, because if your children are the most important thing and you focus on that instead of your own personal ego, it should never be an issue. So it was never a problem with us before I met her. The mothers of my two kids, we all spent Christmases together, we all spent Thanksgivings together, we opened presents together. My children now, with her being my wife now, all of our kids have been raised by three mothers. Mm-hmm. It is a village. So when we talk about a village, that's what's very important to us. Our kids have had three mothers over the course of time. It's never been an issue, was never going to be an issue to begin with. They all have stayed at each other's houses. They all have been to all of the graduations. They all have been to all of the Christmases and the Thanksgiving, and it's never been an issue. And people look at us and say, wow, that's strange. And we look at them like, no, this is normal. This is the way this is supposed to be. So those are the things that we, you know, talk with other couples about when we talk and we counsel other couples about, you know, basically putting your kids and your family ahead of your own personal ego. And had, you know, all of us decided to put our own personal egos aside instead of the kids being the most important thing, then we probably would have had that drama. But we've never had a moment's drama. You know, the three of them don't always see eye to eye on things because it's still three different individuals. But at the end of the day, the love for those kids trumps all of that at the end of the day. So, and
even though the kids are grown now, the mothers still have a very strong support system. Like, we ain't BFFs, but if you need me, I'm there. If I need them, they're there. They have businesses. I support their businesses. They support my businesses. They come do events at the Kundi compound like it's a family. Like, the traditional idea of family just does not work for everybody. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's identifying what does work for you. and just being that and being okay with it. Even if mom and daddy don't agree, even if the church don't agree, even if, you know, your best friend from junior high school don't agree. What matters is what works for you and how you set that dynamic for yourself. That's it. That's all. Now we can go on and on, but we try to be respectful of other time. So.
Y'all had said that y'all were talking about the breakup. We didn't get that part yet.
Oh.
We went back to that. Huh?
She was coming back.
So, I guess this is more on me than on her, but I mean, I will admit that for us and for our relationship, and I think speaking to the young ladies in the audience and the young men too, one of the most important things that I learned in any relationship is that the other person, whoever that person is in the relationship, will only get away with as much as you allow them to get away with. My wife and I dated for 7 years, 8 years. We lived together for like the last 3 of those years. And that worked for us because, you know, we both agreed that we needed to cohabitate so that we could learn about each other if we were going to get married. That was important. I know
we weren't trying to get married initially.
A lot of people. I love it. But at the end of the day, we felt like living together was going to be the thing that was going to help us to learn about each other. And incidentally, it did. So in the 8th year of us living together, I had spent probably the better part of our first 6, 7 years together. I was on the road, I was doing music, you know, I was either touring, recording, basically running my company, running my record company, and, you know, she was going to work every day. I was really focused on music, focused on myself, focused on all the wrong things. And there came to a point where we came to a crossroads in a relationship. And I remember a conversation that we had, several conversations, but the last conversation that we had, you know, she told me, she's like, look, I'm not happy. This is not going in the direction that I needed to go in. You got till August to get it together. So we had that conversation, and I can say this now, you know, she told me I had until August. I really didn't take the conversation seriously. I didn't think that she was going to actually do anything at that time. I was, you know, ego and pride goeth before the fall. So, you know, I was like, hey, you know, nobody's leaving Kamikaze. Nobody's done that. It's not going to do it. So the months progressed, and I didn't really do anything to solve the issues that we were having. You know, I did some surface things, thinking that those were going to solve the problems because sometimes they had worked in the past. So I was just really kind of just scratching the surface and kind of glancing over what the issues were. So finally, I came in the house one day, and it was in August, incidentally. I came in the house, and she was coming down the stairs with her mattress. And so I walk in, and I was like, you know, what are you doing? Where are you going? She was like, oh, I told you, it's August. I'm out here. And that's really basically how that went. And
mind y'all, I'm a female. I was packing the entire time. So how he was able to block this whole visual of boxes and suitcases and all this stuff, I don't know, but I really do believe in his spirit, he was blocking it. Like he didn't see the look on his face when he saw me coming down the stairs to move my stuff was like, oh my God, what is this? And I'm like, what you mean? We didn't have a conversation anymore after that conversation. Granted.
I don't know if all this packing was going on.
Baby,
I don't know about that. I mean, it was probably, clearly there was some packing going on because he was ready when I came in the house today. Clearly some packing had happened. I don't know if it was happening over the course of the, you know, the entire time. But anyway, let me finish the story. All right, so at any rate, so I walk in and she's got her cousins. They're moving the mattresses down and put the mattresses on the truck. And she got in the car and she drove off. And literally, it was like a movie And it was kind of funny
like
when I
color
think about it
purple.
now. It was like a movie. And I walked out the steps right in front. And I actually walked out my door and walked on the steps and kind of walked right to the street. And I watched the truck leave. Watching the truck leave. It's funny now, but you know, then if you can imagine it, I was really literally sitting there watching the truck because I couldn't believe that she had drove off. I was like, I can't believe it. So of course I did I went back in and, I was looking at my watch and, looking at the clock and I was like, yeah, she's gonna be back. She's gonna be back. So
I had a whole apartment.
2-3 days. Yeah, she had put a deposit down in an apartment. She had an apartment. She had paid the deposit. She moved right into it. That I didn't know of. Touche. You got me on that one. So at that moment, it clicked into my head at that point that you really screwed this up. And you got to fix it. If this is the woman that you really want to be with, then you need to do whatever it is you need to do to get her back. In that moment where I watched her drive off, it's not cliche, it's not a movie. From that moment when she drove off, my aim and my goal at that point was to get her back at that moment that she drove off. So I spent the next 3 years, a very tough 3 years, I spent the next 3 years trying to win her back. She went into a whole relationship with a whole other person. And I spent the 3 years in between trying to win her back and record her and do the things that I did originally to win her hand. And one of the most important things I learned is whatever you did to get her, you better be prepared to do it to keep her all along the way. And that was a lesson that I learned. And that was one of the moments where I learned to be selfless, and I learned about communication, I learned about compromise, and I learned what you actually have to do to have a very solid and fruitful and viable relationship. And after the 3 years passed, I actually won her back. And the moment that she came back and said that she would come back, I didn't waste another moment after that, because I had fought so hard for those 3 years. I knew that this was the woman that I wanted to be with and the woman that I wanted to marry. So as soon as she came back, I asked her to marry me because I did not want her to get away from me again. So at that point, we began our life together going forward at that point. But if it was not for her leaving at that time, I would have continued on the path that I was going on. If she had not made me get some act right, I would have been doing the same thing over and over again. It's the thing that I learned, and I tell my kids and I tell my daughter in the same sense. People only get away with as much as you allow them to get away with. If you want a person to change their ways and they're not doing it, sometimes you got to let those people go. And you got to let them figure out if this is what they want or not. But if you stay, they're not going to change. If you stay, they're not going to get right. If they stay, they're never going to become the person that they potentially could be or the person that you fell in love with if you don't do that. Sometimes it's difficult, and I know a lot of people that have stayed in relationships because they just could not break away from that person. But her leaving me was the absolute best thing that happened to me, not just for our marriage, but for me as a man and for me as a person, because it made me grow up and realize that everything is not given to you. The world does not revolve around you, and that you have to take others' feelings into consideration, and you got to actually do the work in order for you to be in a relationship. And a marriage is work, and you hear that all the time. It's work, it's work, it's work. You got to work at it. It's not something that's going to happen easily, because when you're doing something forever, when you're in something forever, you got to understand there's going to be some downtimes. And any couple that you talk to that's been together for any period of time, my parents, when they were alive, her parents, we talk about this very same thing. There's rocky roads. There's 8 good years, and it might be 2 really bad ones in between, but you stick it out. Forever is a long time. You know in that road that there's going to be some bumps and bruises, and if you don't communicate, compromise, and even in a non-conventional sort of way, it's going to be very difficult for you to do it. So.
He left out some stuff. That was a real cute. I'm gonna let him make it.
I think I touched it all. I did everything.
Remember after the fact that you was dating somebody else? That was important.
So,
y'all see why that's my favorite?
You was actually.
I was in a relationship.
You was in a relationship.
Yo.
I wasn't in. It was some shenanigans because I wasn't really in a.
It's still a necessary part of the story.
I was sowing the oats. We don't want to get into that.
who I was. I didn't want to leave him, but he clearly just wasn't getting it together, and life could not stop there for me. So I always knew that he was going to be the man I married. Either I was going to marry him or not, but he was the man I was supposed to marry. So I was open to him getting it together maybe in about year 3. First 2 years, nah, it was good. But yeah, we worked it out, and now things are cool. We still have arguments. We still, you know, do stuff that married folks do, but the goal is still the same. And the goal is forever.